сегодня в 4 часа утра, без всякого объявления войны, германские вооруженные силы атаковали границы Советского Союза. Началась Великая Отечественная война советского народа против немецко-фашистских захватчиков. Победа будет за нами!
We've received an order to attack the Regiment sector, where German supplies are being moved in by rail. With a little luck, we might just slip through the chaos and attack their supply trains and rail network. Давай, мужики. Welcome aboard my Tupolev SB. It is the 22nd of June, 1941. Nearly every airfield in the western USSR is under attack. So far, ours has been spared, so we're going to get into the air and hit back to the best of our ability. So I'm going to get the aircraft started up here, and we'll get underway. I'll explain a little bit more once we are underway. So engine 1 is started. Starting engine 2. Make sure the tail wheel's locked, why not? Should be good to shut the canopy now as well. Alright, that's 2 good starts. Make sure both engines are selected. Props full forward, mixture 100%. Radiators full open, flaps set for takeoff. Tail wheels locked. Let's go. Airspeed's alive, 100. Usually it seems like the SB is pretty happy to lift off at, well, even south of 150. It's capable of maintaining flight at relatively low speeds, so tail's been up for a while. I think we're good. Alright, in the air, gear up. A little bit of haze near the ground, but we should have decent visibility once we get above it, I should think. Right through about 160, flaps up. Now let's pop open the map. Immediately after takeoff, we want to fly heading 270 until we reach this river here, and then we'll turn left to a heading of 244 and head for our target. So I'm going to power back quite a bit to let our formation get assembled. We'll do 65-65 for now. Leave the radiators full open, the engines are still warming up. We'll get an idea of what they need later. So there's that island in the river. Once that's sort of a beam, I'll make the turn. Let's see what the rest of our formation is up to. They're all in the air, so they should be able to catch up fairly quickly. So I'll probably set climb power once I've made the turn. And that's more or less a beam, that island. So we'll turn left to a heading of 244. And I'll see what a climb power setting of 85-85 does in terms of letting the formation keep up. I've done a few little training missions in the SB so far, but I'm definitely still learning the aircraft and also the ins and outs of how the AI formations behave in IL-2 1946 with the mod setup that I've got. Relevant links for that will be in the description, of course. So, now that we're in the air, a little bit about this career. It's going to be an Ironman career as usual, so if I'm killed or taken prisoner, and I suspect that won't take very long given what happened to most of the SB squadrons historically, that will be the end of the career. Now, onto the aircraft itself. The Tupolev SB, I think, is a bit of a bit too readily ignored machine, really. It was straight up revolutionary when it entered service in 1936. It was almost sort of your... well, it typifies the fast bomber concepts that were being thrown around in the mid-30s. And the SB was one of the fastest airplanes in the world at that time. But, of course, by the time World War II and even the later parts of the Spanish Civil War come around, the fighters have very much caught up. Anyway, just making sure I'm vaguely still on track here. Aiming to pass over a little piece of river that pokes out over there. I think that's all good. So, back to the SB. Entered service in 1936. Very fast for that time. It sees service in the Spanish Civil War, flown by Soviet and Republican pilots. And initially, it's genuinely capable of outrunning all of the fighter opposition arrayed against it, and this remains so until the first Condor Legion BF-109s show up. At which point their loss rates rather understandably started to go up, and of course now it's 1941, dealing with 109 E's and F's. We're not going to outrun anything. And we're not particularly well protected either, because if you look in the turrets here, we have two rifle caliber machine guns facing forward, one facing downward, and one upward in the turret up there, and that's it in terms of protection. Now, there were some I-16s taking off behind us, so hopefully we will have some fighter protection on the way to this target. So, where is the town of Skole? I think it's underneath my port wing there. And does this river actually end out in front of us? Yes, it does. Okay, so I'm more or less where I think I am then. So our bombing altitude during this mission is going to be 2,300 meters. And we're actually almost there, but I'll continue to climb to that altitude and we'll head for our target and see if we can sort of slip through the chaos of this first day of the war and actually reach our target. We'll see. Right, so we are level at 2,300 meters, which will be our bombing altitude. No enemy fighters spotted as yet, and we do have a fighter escort of our own. Who knows, maybe we'll manage to survive the first day of the war after all. So I wanted to check in with a few little items about navigation. So, I'm essentially navigating by two methods. One is called pilotage, which is entirely based on referencing landmarks on the ground. Mainly, we are currently crossing this river. You can see this blorb off to our right, and this little leg off to our left, and this sort of C, U-shape, whatever one should desire, out in front of us here. And the other method, which I will employ aspects of, is Dead Reckoning, which is calculating drift, navigating by airspeed and elapsed time, that kind of thing. And the main element of that which I will employ is actually using the bomb site as a de facto drift meter. And the way that we can do this, for those of you who watched my Lancaster or Heinkel 111 stuff in the past, is to point it straight down and observe the drift of objects on the ground relative to the line. It's kind of hard to do when we're over a forest like this, but once we're no longer over it, we'll see. But in essence, what you do is pick an object on the ground and try to keep it on the line. And let's see. Actually looks like we're not experiencing any meaningful drift right now, or at least less than 1 degree's worth, because everything seems to pass straight down the line when I have the drift correction set to 0. So that makes my job easy, because it just means we can fly our track from the map as a heading, and it should in principle take us straight to the target. And combining that with the more Dead Reckoning elements, we should be able to find it. Now the other thing is, and this is an issue I haven't entirely been able to resolve as such, the mission briefings in 46 and B.A.T mod and everything like that, they don't give you your target elevation. So the data figure to input into the bomb site is something I'm going to have to sort of bodge a little bit. What I did in this case is, because if you look at the geography that's around us here, these are the foothills of the Carpathian Mountains. We can't just assume that the ground beneath us is flat, and that basically the elevation of the airfield we took off from will be the same as the target. In the case of today, it does appear to be roughly the same, and we'll need to knock about 150 meters off the barometric altitude when we input the data to the bomb site. But what I ended up doing was going and looking at a topographical map of this part of the world and hoping that the in-game map reflects that correctly. So the elevation of our target, which is the sort of railway station in DGEN, is about 130 meters or thereabouts. So I will preliminarily input that data, I think. So I'll go for 2,150 as what I input into the bomb site, and we'll just have to see how correct that is. And we'll hop down here because the airspeed indicator next to the bombardier appears to display true airspeed, which is the figure that we need to input. So that is currently hovering at around 310. Now, we could calculate true airspeed with the thermometer next to it here, but that instrument appears to be doing that for us. So that's all good. Now, navigation items, just to make sure I don't get lost whilst I'm explaining all this. We have a river that ends and another river that ends. We need to pass basically over just inside the end of it here. Yeah, we're still on track. Now, in terms of making minor corrections in turns, you might have noticed this little crank on the starboard side of the cockpit here. That's the rudder trim, and basically I'm using that to make heading adjustments. And if you want to make sure you're on a consistent heading, you want to crank it so that the ball in the turn coordinator right in the center of the panel here is centered, which for the moment it is. So we should be flying more or less in a straight line. And our two other SBs are currently in an echelon right formation, so that's fine, we can leave them there. I've, in my tests, discovered some weird little quirks with the AI in terms of maintaining formation, so I'm probably just going to touch it as little as possible. Now, if we're passing over this river, we're not actually a million miles out from the target, so I'm going to hop down into this bomb site here and actually pop the elevation up a bit and see if I can spot the target. Now, for those of you who watched things like my Hunkel 111 or A20 careers in IL-2 Great Battles, this is going to be a little primitive by comparison because we don't have the kinds of workarounds that you do in Great Battles. Because in IL-2 Great Battles, you have perfectly accurate wind data that you can input into the site, so if you enter all the data correctly, you can put a bomb in a pickle barrel from 30,000 feet. That was not the case in real life, and it's not the case in 1946, so bombing accuracy is not going to be of the same standard in this series, so you can expect that, certainly for now. But I'll do my best, because basically I can correct for drift, and I can input true airspeed, but the actual wind is not going to be something we're really able to compensate for very well. Now, the way that that was dealt with in World War II was basically one of two ways. If you were hitting more of a tactical target like this that's fairly small, you would bomb from a relatively low altitude, probably between 3,000 and 5,000 meters, or roughly speaking 10,000 to 15,000 feet. Or you would have a huge formation bombing a larger target from higher altitude and probably still miss it a lot of the time, as the 8th Air Force and such like did. So we're bombing from quite low today, 2,300 meters. That may put us in some danger of flak, and I see specks on the horizon. And I'm not at all sure who those are. And I also saw my own aircraft drifting off behind me. You guys need to keep that formation together. Rejoin, please. We'll see if that works. I think it will. Okay, those are German fighters. I'm gonna hop on the forward turret in case any of them makes a head-on pass at us. In fact, I'll shoot at them now since that appears to be what they're doing. And I seem to have convinced that one to break off. Oh! Yep, those are definitely 109s, and oh boy, the field of fire on this gun is terrible. Okay, our I-16s are going after them. Hopefully they can keep them busy long enough to enable us to hit our target, which should be coming up here. So, bomb sight. And there's a big bloody cloud in the way. That's very helpful. See if I can spot any landmarks adjacent to the target. I think we're actually a pretty good way too far north. Yeah, because that's this elbow in the river here, so we need to turn left in order to reach our target, most likely. So I've got full left rudder trim in. Because, yeah, I think this is this town here that I can see out the window, so need to pull slightly to port. The good news is that the town that our target is in is appearing out from behind the clouds pretty well. That being said, I'm going to need to make a manual left turn in order to actually get on target. Okay, stabilizer back on. Bugger. Ah! This view stuff is still befuddling me some of the time. Okay, I don't see any trains. I'm going to bomb the railway station. It's just going to have to be good enough. So, flight, ground targets, drop bombs on my command, briefly pop out to correct the... Actually, no, we're still at 310 through airspeed, and bombs away. I dropped a little late. Hopefully the rest of the formation will be quote-unquote on target. I mean, our targets were trains. I didn't see any. This is a railway station. That's going to have to be good enough. So, those guys drop the bombs. We'll see how that goes. Uh-oh. Is that one of my bombers being hit? I'm not entirely sure. Woo! Okay, well, if there's any concession to the day, it's that we put our bombs on that railway station. So, after hitting the target, we turn to port. Do a heading of 124. Our next immediate sort of, let's see, direction am I pointing at? I'm facing south now. Okay, that town over there is the one that we more or less want to overfly on our way to waypoint 7. Okay. How's the formation doing? Okay, all my bombers are still here, so that must have been a fighter calling out that he was hit. Well, there's not much we can do about that, but if they keep the German fighters busy, great. And off. And get coordinated again, since I was kind of wooing about with the rudder trim to get on target. Need to get back into a state where we're coordinated. Well, if we can hide in these clouds, that also may be helpful. Once we've passed that town and reached quote-unquote waypoint 7, honestly, I'm not that concerned about flying to this point. I kind of want to point the nose towards home on the sooner side. But in principle, once we're there, we'll turn to a heading of 063 and make our way home. And plenty of rivers and towns to mark the route back. And honestly, I'm going to cut the corner a bit. We don't need to be stooging around over enemy territory for any longer than we need to. So, 06. E. Compass is a little bit low res. Yeah. 063, and then once we break through these clouds, I'll get down to the job of trying to navigate home. I don't think those fighters are anywhere near us at this time, so probably still tangling with the I-16s. Well, we might be able to get away with this then. We'll see.
Я второй. Черт. Уберите его с моего хвоста. Я первый. Иду на помощь. Держись. Второй. Прыгай. Я второй. Скорее прыгай. Я подбит. Я третий. Кто-нибудь. Уберите его с моего хвоста. Я второй. Выполняю. Я третий. Выполняю. Второй. Немедленно возвратиться домой. Конец связи.
Welcome back. To our good fortune, we have made it back to base. That is it down there. I'm going to tell the formation to return to base and land independently. And we'll make our way down and land, so sort of making a staggered downwind here. I'll do a quick downwind check. Radiators can probably actually stay at half. Props and mixture full forwards, tail wheels locked. That's good. I'll let the speed come back just a little bit more, then we'll put the gear and flaps down. That's probably good enough. Flaps set for takeoff, please. And I'll do landing once we're on final. I'm going to maintain probably 190 or so for now, aim for an approach speed of about 160, 170 is what the SB seems to handle. Honestly, I've been having to do all of the flying and engine management in the SB by the seat of my pants because I haven't been able to find any real-world data. If anyone somehow has an SB2M manual, preferably translated into English, although I can read some Russian, that would be awesome, but I suspect that's the sort of thing that's very hard to find indeed. Little high, but it doesn't matter. It's a somewhat draggy airplane once it gets slow, so we can just pull the power off and drop like a brick to get on the proper glide slope. We're gonna make the field, it'll be fine. Now, whether I can land in an at all dignified fashion is another question. So far in my training I've been able to. It seems like a wheel landing is the thing to do in the SB. Yeah. Once we're settled, bring the flaps up. Let the tail come down. Easy on the brakes. Open up the radiators now that we're down. And once we're nice and slow, I'll vacate and try not to ground loop. And honestly, I'll just sort of park it somewhere out of the way. I'm not super fussed about getting to the exact right spot on the field. And since there weren't any enemy fighters swarming around as of yet, I think we can safely assume that our other aircraft will make it back down, so I can just shut down most likely. And we can have a little bit of a look at the outside of the airplane. I do think the SB is a bit of a looker. Massive wing relative to the length of the fuselage, as seems to have been a bit of a design convention for the period, but there you go. Hopefully it can bring us safely home at least a few more times. And I think that will be about time to end the mission and see how things went. That's a hell of a debrief to say this day could be better, but it could be much worse since the Soviet Air Force will close out the 22nd of June, having lost some 1,800 aircraft, most of them on the ground. But the SB force did survive in some numbers, and they fought like hell in the early months of the war, and pretty much by the end of 1941, they're more or less... well, their loss rates mean that they're more or less gone by the end of the year, and the survivors are pulled off of combat duty. Yeah, so the price that was paid for us being able to notionally hit our target was the loss of 7 I-16 fighters that accompanied us, all shot down by 109s as we neared the target there, but it seems we managed to evade them on the return trip. Well, that's day one of the war. we'll see what day 2 brings in the next mission. Until then, thanks for watching, and toodles.